Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. Rocket Tranquility, we copy you on the ground.
New possibilities are opening up for scientific cooperation between countries.
1-0. Liftoff. American return to space as Discovery clears the tower.
Discovery, go and throttle up.
Discovery, roger. Go for deploy.
Everybody in the shuttle program, the crew is go for launch.
Roger. Nice to be in orbit.
We have followed in their footsteps to get us where we are today.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. I'd like to welcome everyone to the traditional pre-launch news conference following today's launch readiness review ahead of NASA and SpaceX's Crew 1 Falcon 9 and Crew Dragon flight to the International Space Station. Here to provide all the details are folks that were part of the review today and also have been part of a lot of the preparations that have led up to this moment. It's a very exciting day for everybody in NASA and SpaceX, and hopefully all of you that are tuning in today. Let me introduce the panel, and then I'll let each one of them give you some words before we take questions. Steve Stitch, he's the NASA manager for the Commercial Crew Program here at Kennedy. Also Joel Montalbano, the NASA manager of the International Space Station Program at Johnson Space Center in Houston. Norm Knight, he's the Deputy Manager of Flight Operations Directorate at Johnson. Also joining us is Benji Reed, who's the Senior Director, Human Spaceflight Programs at SpaceX. We're glad to have him with us. Also Kurt Costello, who is the NASA ISS Program Chief Scientist at Johnson Space Center. And last but not least is Arlena Moses. She's the Launch Weather Officer for the U.S. Air Force 45th Weather Squadron. So I know everybody's looking forward to hearing from Arlena as well. With that, I'll turn it over to Steve and let him take it from there.
Okay. Thank you, Kyle. It's great to be here following the launch readiness review today. You know, it's been a busy few days since we last talked. We talked to you after the flight readiness review on Tuesday. Since that time, we've put the Falcon 9 vehicle through a static fire, which is an important test for us to check out the rocket and make sure that the 9 engines on F9 and all the systems on the rocket were functioning as expected. We've reviewed all that data over the last few days, and the rocket looks really good. It was important for us to also do some inspections after that static fire. We've swapped out a couple of engines on this vehicle, and we did those inspections, and everything looks really good. We also did a dry dress practice with the crew. The crew suited up, got in their spacesuits, went out to the launch pad, and got installed into the vehicle. It's the first time we put 4 people in Dragon, so that was an important test for us, and that test went really, really well. Overall, in terms of looking at the weather and also looking at recovery of the booster for this flight, we have adjusted the launch date. We were targeting a Saturday launch. We've adjusted the launch date 24 hours later, and today we're targeting a Sunday launch at 7:27 p.m. Eastern Time. That'll put docking on Monday at about 11 p.m. Eastern Time. And we did that. We looked carefully at the weather, and the onshore flow looked really not so good for Saturday. Also, we needed to get the drone recovery ship in place to recover the booster. For NASA, this booster, and SpaceX, this booster is very important for us. We're going to reuse the first stage that we're flying on Crew 1 for the Crew 2 mission coming up in the springtime with the launch date. Crew 2's got a launch date of March 30th. So it's important to recover that booster, and so we needed to get the drone ship in place. Overall, you know, it's going to be an exciting flight. I will remind you that Crew 1 is going to be the longest U.S. space flight ever, exceeding what we had on the final Skylab mission, Skylab 3. It's the first mission to have 4 crew in the capsule, which we're excited about to enhance the science on the space station. And as well, it's our first FAA licensed launch as well as we move into this next step. So we're excited to go fly this increment mission for the space station program. We'll continue to watch the weather and the vehicles, and we're looking forward to a good launch on Sunday. And now I'll turn it over to Joel Montalbano.
Thank you, Steve. Welcome again to today's press brief. You know, these past few days we've had a number of reviews and operations, as Steve's mentioned, and today, as we concluded the launch readiness review, I can tell you that the International Space Station Partnership is ready for this mission. You know, as Steve said, looking at a launch time of 7:27 Eastern Time, 7:27 p.m. Eastern Time on Sunday, giving us a docking late Monday evening, approximately 11 p.m. Eastern Time. Shortly after docking, we'll do the standard leak checks, and then we'll have a welcome ceremony on board. That'll be about 2.5 hours after docking. This week, we've been doing a lot of discussion with Kate and Sergey's on orbit today and keeping them up to speed with the launch preparations. They're excited, and they're ready to have some new crew members on board. This vehicle is also bringing approximately 240 kilograms of pressurized cargo, again, to enhance what we're doing on board the International Space Station. As Steve said, with these 4 crew members, adding to the 3 crew members on board, we'll have a total of 7 ISS crew members for a sustained increment. This vehicle will stay up there for a long duration increment and return in April of next year. So we're looking forward to having the extra capability on board, which will allow us to increase the science we do, increase the exploration development we do in order for the Artemis program and future programs. We're also this year celebrating 20 years of continuous human presence on board the International Space Station. And during those 20 years, we've set the standard for international cooperation and international operations. But we keep learning. We learn every day. And, you know, NASA, with American industry, has developed these commercial vehicles that allow us to bring more people to low Earth orbit, bring more people to the International Space Station, allow us to do more science in low Earth orbit, and allow more commercial opportunities. So with that, a huge thanks to the Commercial Crew Program, a huge thanks to SpaceX for getting us to where we are today. The International Space Station Partnership is glad to be here. We're excited for launch on Sunday. We're looking forward to Monday's docking and a long duration increment. So with that, I'll turn it over to Norm. Thank you.
Let's see. Thank you, Joel. As was stated, the launch readiness review today went very well. We echo that. And, you know, stepping back and kind of reflecting on Demo 2 in the development cycle, now to the operational cycle, just with, you know, kind of the journey leading up to this in the LRR. And it was really evident that there was great improvement on, you know, the closed out work, the less open work there was, and the overall readiness level from the team for this vehicle. So it was very encouraging. An absolute focus on crew safety and vehicle safety, which both the NASA and SpaceX teams have done a great job with, and we're very satisfied with that. This was on the heels of dry dress yesterday that Steve mentioned. That went very well. That was the first opportunity really to let the crew suit up and really try out their vehicle for the first time before launch day to make sure that, you know, the fit was right and there were no last minute type things that needed to be tweaked up prior to launch. And again, that went very well. We're very excited about that. Had an opportunity to meet with the crew this morning and talk with them a little bit about their upcoming launch. And I tell you what, they were absolutely excited, and you could just feel the radiant excitement coming off of them. In fact, when I walked out of that briefing, I was excited myself. I mean, you could just feel the energy from the crew, and we see that throughout the team, which is great because it means we're real close and we're ready to go, which is very important. You know, the message that they wanted to convey is resilience, and to echo once again that, you know, the journey to get here is one of resilience. And it was a hard journey with a lot of stuff going on and COVID affecting the teams, but it was that resilience and determination by a lot of folks that have led up to this point. We'll safely get them into orbit, and we'll safely get them docked, performing 6 months of science, and returning back to Earth safely as well. So, again, a lot of folks that were involved with that, and just an appreciation for that hard work that has got us to this point. So it was very good. So with that, I will turn it over to Benji and look forward to questions later.
Great. Thank you very much, Norm. First of all, I'm sitting here and I'm excited again to be here. To think that this is our third time that we've had the opportunity to come and launch here from Kennedy Space Center. We did our in-flight abort test back at the beginning of this year. We did our Demo 2 mission with Bob and Doug, and now we're coming up here on Crew 1, our first operational mission to start providing crewed services to the station to keep Joel's program running, at 6-month intervals. It's just incredible. And if you watch the beginning here just before we started this press briefing and you saw the montage they had of all the different past crew missions, and to hear Joel talk about 20 years in space, it's so cool, and it's an honor to get to be here. I'm certainly stoked. On behalf of all the SpaceX employees, our vendors, our partners, all of our families, I want to take this opportunity to say thank you to NASA and to all of our partners to let us be a part of this and to help carry this sacred honor and responsibility on our shoulders. This is the culmination of years of work and effort from a lot of people and a lot of time, and we have built, I think, what I would call is one of the safest launch vehicles and spacecraft ever, and it's an honor to be a part of that. We culminated our efforts in that with our static fire on Wednesday. Steve mentioned that just a little bit, and in fact I think we have a video to show for that. Great. That was a full 7-second duration static fire. The teams looked at all the data coming out of that static fire. Actually, they finished that up. Those reviews, we did joint reviews with the NASA teams and our teams, and it looked great. We assessed everything that came from the vehicle, and we feel very good about it. As you know, we did some work on the engines and other aspects of the vehicle as we came into this, getting ready for this launch. And that static fire is very key to ensuring that we're ready to go. And like I said, those 7 seconds looked awesome. The next thing I want to show you is a picture that we have from dry dress. And dry dress is a dress rehearsal that we do with the crew. And they do the whole thing where they get suited up at the building, what they call the ONC building here on Kennedy Space Center. They get suited up, they come across in their Teslas, and they go up the tower and get all the way into Dragon. And it's a very important process that we do, where we walk through all of that with our teams, the ground teams working with the crew themselves, and make sure everything checks out. When I look at this picture, again, I get very excited to think about this next step on this big journey that we have ahead of us. We've got 4 astronauts who will be going up. We have one person who's never been to space, Victor, who's very excited. We have Soichi, who's our first international partner, who will be joining us, which is really, really cool. All right. Let's talk a little bit about what's going to happen on launch day itself. As I talked about, dry dress was a practice for that. So at about 4 hours before launch day, the crew will be in that ONC building. They'll be in their area getting suited up. Our suit techs will be helping them get ready. We'll be doing various leak checks and other fit checks as we go through that. And then the astronauts will come out at about 3 hours before launch, get into the Teslas, wave goodbye to their families, and all their friends who are there, and then come across to the launch pad. They'll go up the launch tower, come across the crew arm, and at about 2.5 hours before launch, they'll be entering the vehicle. They'll get inside the vehicle. They'll get all strapped in, get all safe, and about approximately double check my time here, at about 45 minutes before launch is when we'll do the final go pull for loading the vehicle and for arming the escape system. We have the launch escape system on Dragon that's ready to go just in case we need to, if something goes wrong with the launch vehicle, Dragon can escape the vehicle, the crew to safety and splash down in the ocean. So that'll be armed. At that point, at about 30 minutes before launch is when we start loading the launch vehicle with propellants, and we're off. Let's go next to our line drawing that we have. This gives you a sense of what it looks like when we're actually doing launch. I won't go through all the details, but come at some of the highlights here. At about 2 minutes and 40 seconds, we have our first and second stage separation. After that happens, the first stage will land on the drone ship, which is heading out right now to be in position to be ready for that. And then the second stage will continue to carry Dragon to orbit. About 8 minutes and 50 seconds into the mission, the second engine will cut out. Shortly after that, Dragon will separate, and they're off on their phasing journey to station. If we go to the next line drawing, we can see that. We get a sense of what this looks like. So phasing is this process where we're essentially catching up with space station. The process is that, space station's zooming around the Earth very fast, so is Dragon. And you're trying to do this game where you're using gravity and the behavior of orbital mechanics, as well as minimizing the amount of fuel that you have to use to catch up and get the two vehicles to come together. So we go through this process of phasing, and based on the orbital mechanics, the time and the day of launch, in this case, this particular phasing time will take about 25 hours. In about 25 hours, we'll be close to where we need to be to basically be in position to come up to station. And then a few hours after that, we'll have docked to the space station. Let's go ahead and we'll actually come back, and I'll talk a little bit about what's going to happen once they dock. So the crew docks on station, and of course, obviously they're going to come through and they'll be welcomed by the other crew that's up there, and then start to get to work very quickly. Two things that particularly involve SpaceX that'll be happening during their 6 months up on station. One is coming up in just a few weeks. We have our first cargo Dragon, our new Dragon 2 cargo vehicle, but it'll be our CRS-21 mission. We'll be heading up, and that's full of science for all of this crew, for the Crew 1 crew to be working on. So the first few weeks after they've docked, they're going to be getting ready for that. They're going to be wrapping up other work and preparing. And when CRS-21 shows up, they'll be spending a lot of time working on all the critical science that's going on there. And then near the end of their time, at the end of the 6 months or so, we'll be sending up another Dragon. So Crew 2 Dragon will go up, again with another 4 astronauts on board. And that Dragon will go up, dock to station. And again, there'll be a handoff. Everybody will see each other, hand off the work. And about a week later, our Crew 1 crew will come home. Let's take a look at what that looks like in a line drawing. So you can see here, we do another departure. Docking, both the docking and the undocking process is an automated process. It's fully autonomous. Of course, at any time during the docking, the astronauts are able to take control. Both astronauts on the vehicle and ISS during docking and undocking are watching closely everything that's happening. They want to make sure everything's happening correctly. As we move away from station, we get into position to actually start our phasing to come home. It's the same process that I talked about. We need to phase to make sure that we're going to hit the right spot on the Earth at the right time for splashdown. After that happens, our recovery crews will come out, and they'll be meeting the crew. We have a large recovery vessel plus a couple of fast boats. The fast boats will go out and meet the crew. And first thing they'll do is they'll check the area. They'll make sure everything's safe for approach. The second fast boat will be recovering the parachutes, and then we'll go ahead with our larger vehicle, which will pull Dragon out of the water. All right. One of the things I do want to mention as we talk about this recovery process, we know that everybody's very excited about launch and very excited about recovery and human spaceflight in general. We certainly do ask that everybody who's involved, if you come out to watch the launch or any of the different operations that we're doing, that please wear your masks and follow social distancing guidelines, do the right things there to keep everybody safe. And certainly during recovery, we ask that all of the boaters pay good attention to what the Navy and the Coast Guard regulations are and what their advisories will be. It's very important that we keep all of our recovery crews and the crew themselves, the astronauts, to keep them safe. I want to take one more moment here to do a couple of important thanks. Number one, I want to thank all of the SpaceXers and their families, and all of our different teams and partners who've been involved in all of this effort to get us here. It's a very big team, and part of certification, as we've gone through, we talked about the other day that NASA has now certified all of our systems for human space flight. That certification effort is really important, and it means a lot, and it represents the countless, really, hours and hours of work that were put in by all of these teams. It's Dragon, it's Falcon, it's the ground teams, the launch site teams, it's the factory, it's all of our hardware and software operators, everybody. All of them have put their time in and then sacrificed and done the dedication needed. The same is true for all of our NASA partners and all the vendor partners and all the time they've put into it. So a big thank you there. And then finally, a very important special thank you to the astronauts who will be flying. Victor, Mike, Shannon, and Soichi, and to your families, we thank you for the trust that you've put into SpaceX to get you to space, to be there as a lifeboat, and to bring you home safely. Thank you on behalf of all of us.
Thanks, Benji. Now we'll hear from Kurt, talk about the science and the reason that these guys are actually going up there. Take it away, Kurt.
Thank you. As Joel mentioned earlier, it was less than 2 weeks ago that we were celebrating 20 years of continuous crewed presence on orbit. And we weren't celebrating an ending, but really just the end of the beginning. The launch coming up with additional crew members to the ISS is the start of a new era for research and discovery on board. The capabilities of the Crew Dragon bringing additional crew and samples back to the site here at KSC are an amazing capability. We hope to double the amount of crew time going into science and research. We'll again have easier access for those samples when they come back to Earth, and we'll have easier access to our crew members, both pre and post flight, to conduct some of our human research. Now, we do have several investigations going up on this flight. We've got about 28 kilograms of payloads going up. Some of those experiments will be going up for Soichi to include education and public outreach experiments for him. And then we have a student experiment called Genes in Space 7, which will be looking at the humble fruit fly and how it adapts on orbit to changes in circadian rhythm. Circadian rhythm is our sensitivity to the day-night cycle here on Earth. And if you can imagine on orbit when you have 16 day-night cycles every day, it can be a bit confusing to the body. Well, fruit flies are great little model organisms. They help us understand what's going on in the human body because they share about 75% of the genes that cause disease in the human body. So we'll be looking at those. And then last but not least, our astronauts are members of our human research team. And they'll be conducting a number of experiments on themselves, both before, during, and after the mission. One of those is food physiology, which is looking at whether nutritional changes in the astronaut's diet can be beneficial for preventing spaceflight impairments that we typically see on orbit. So again, for Mike, Victor, Soichi, and especially my old alum Shannon from Rice, Godspeed, and thank you so much for the amount of hard work and research you're going to be putting in.
Thanks, Kurt. And now the topic everybody knows that likes to talk about is weather, so let's turn it over to Arlena and have her give us the launch weather forecast.
So, as for us here in Florida, we've been plagued by Tropical Storm Eta for most of the upcoming weekend. It was a little uncertain at first if it was going to clear out this weekend, but thankfully Eta is well out to sea and moving further with time. And with its passage, it brought a bit of a cool front through here in Florida, though I know it doesn't feel like it very much right now. If you're here locally, still pretty warm and humid, but overall it's going to give us a pretty good shot for weather for our primary launch day. So if we could take a look here at the forecast. So we are looking right now at a no-go weather probability of 40% with that kind of weak front that came through. couple days ago. It's going to kind of creep back north towards us and going to keep our winds light and variable. So that onshore wind component not going to be as much of a concern for our attempt launch on Sunday. But we are going to see some few showers in the area with some cumulus clouds, and also with the concern for flying both the rocket and the Dragon capsule through any precipitation, any of those showers that may be out there during the launch time. Now, if we take a look at our backup window going into Wednesday, so a couple days later, we dry out quite a bit. A nice area of high pressure. We get a true Florida cold front coming through, so temperatures, you can see, are going to be a bit cool for at least us here in Florida, maybe not for everybody. Our rain chances drop quite a bit, so we only have concern for a few clouds. The downside is, however, winds are going to be coming from the northeast a little bit stronger on that particular day, but that is something that we'll be monitoring with the weather. So good luck, everybody, and we'll be here doing our part with the weather to make sure we launch successfully.
Great. Thanks a lot. Thanks, everybody else. We're ready for questions. There's a lot of people in the queue, as you can imagine. It's also been a long day. We've got about a half an hour or so for question and answer. I'm going to call on you by name and affiliation, and if you can, try to limit your question to one part question, so that we can try to get to as many folks as we can on the line. And first up is Marcia Dunn, Associated Press.
Oh, yes. Hi. I'm hoping you can hear me. For Steve, I'm wondering, what is NASA's latest thinking about Elon being allowed into the launch control if his latest lab tests come up negative? And for Benji, how important is it to have him on console in person for this launch? Thank you.
I think we got a little bit of an audio problem. I think Marcia's question is, and I don't know who this would be directed to, was is there a concern relative to the COVID concern that Elon Musk raised earlier via tweet, I believe.
Let's see, Kyle. I'll jump in and start on that one. As was in the news today, it was reported that Elon took several COVID tests, and of course that stirred up a bunch of questions relative to health and potential contamination. But what I can tell you is NASA and our commercial partners have a health stabilization plan in place, and really it's a protocol that protects the flight crew from any disease or any illness, because if they're compromised, that can affect and jeopardize the mission. So we pay a lot of attention to that, and we've done that over many years. This is something that has been in place back, I think, in the Apollo timeframe, in Shuttle for all those missions and for all the station missions as well, to make sure that we're protecting the flight crew. And how we do this is that obviously the crew is, when they come close to launch, are put into a quarantine, and they start that soft quarantine about 21 days prior to flight. That period's about from 21 days to 14 days, where that soft quarantine, they're really starting to isolate, reduce their movement, their exposure to other folks. And then at 14 days to launch, we call it a hard quarantine, and that's where they're totally isolated and really watched closely by the docs. So that's a protocol that's in place for the crew. In addition to that, that protocol also is for all folks that have contact with the crew. So what we do is we train our personnel, both our personnel and SpaceX personnel in this case, what these protocols are. We train them. We make sure that we understand hygiene, social distancing, mask requirements when around the crew. You have to have certain protocols met before you can get close to the crew, whether you're training the crew or getting them prepped for launch. And those people also, depending on the level of contact they have with the crew, are COVID tested to make sure that they are safe And again, that access is very restricted. So you can kind of think of it as concentric circles on the crew's in the center and protecting as it goes out. And as those circles go out, again, those protocols change relative to the contact that people have with the crew. Now, if any of those personnel in that ring or any of those rings comes up with any COVID-type symptoms, they're tested, and we do contact tracing to make sure that we knew who they were around and what impact that could possibly have to the team. So again, we have a health stabilization plan in place, and it has worked effectively for many years, just like it's working today in this COVID environment. Vinci, would you like to add any specific words for the SpaceX team?
Sure, absolutely. First of all, it's important to remember that we have thousands of people working at SpaceX, and it takes all of those people to work together to build the systems that we do and to launch rockets and launch the Dragon spacecraft. So it's important that we understand that, that any one of our team members, if they do have COVID or get a test or whatever, then we work through that. And we have all of the protections in place that we do to make sure that everybody's safe. Certainly in the case of our launches, in the case of the crew, everybody's safe. We do the contact tracing that needs to be done, and I can assure everyone that that we're looking good for the Crew 1 launch and all of the critical personnel involved.
Thanks.
I think we just add one more thing on that for the HSP. It's the restricted access and everything, and no one's above this access. It doesn't matter if you're Elon Musk or Jim Bridenstine. If you have not met those protocols, or if any of those protocols have been compromised, then we're not going to let you near the crew. And again, it's to protect the overall mission that we're trying to accomplish. And everybody recognizes that. It's no surprise.
Thanks to you both. I think we have the audio problem fixed. We'll go to Gina Sunseri, ABC News. Okay, let's go to the next one. I think let's try Bill Harwood with CBS News.
I'm here, Kyle. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. I'm not sure who this is for, but just a really quick question. And if you've already covered this, I apologize in advance. I had some phone problems. Was part of the issue today the expected weather in the recovery zone? In other words, was the forecast to be out of limits, or was the forecast favorable and the drone ship couldn't get there in time, or was it both? Thanks.
It's fundamentally, this is it was an issue of getting the drone ship there in time. The weather was such because of this tropical storm that we couldn't get the drone ship to leave in time and get there. And the sea states are such that we just can't get the speed up to get there that we were hoping to hit the Saturday launch. We were able to leave port yesterday around midday, and now we're going to be getting there in time for plenty of time for a Sunday launch.
Okay, next is Paul Brinkman, United Press International. Go ahead, Paul.
Hi, yes, thanks for taking my call. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, my question is about just about the change. If one of you could walk us through a little bit of, I guess, Norm or Benji, about what happens when you delay a launch by a day like this and a crewed launch. Does anything have to be done to the capsule, or I'm assuming no more fuel has to be added for a longer flight, but does the crew have to repack their cargo or in a different way or anything like that, since they're going to be up there 3 times longer than they're going to be in flight longer than they thought they would? Thanks.
Let's see, Benji, why don't you start out with the vehicle? And
the vehicle, sure, absolutely. So in terms of the vehicle, really there's nothing different that we do, right? We checked out ready as we went through all those tests that I talked about in the lead up, really many months up to launch, and now we do these tests this week to make sure we're ready. We go through these flight readiness reviews like we wrapped up earlier this week, the launch readiness review. All of these are actually go for launch tomorrow. The only thing that's not go for launch is having that drone ship in position and overall weather. And so that's really key. There's nothing more that we do other than continue to check and double check and triple check. Right. This is what we're all doing. All of our engineers, all of us will be looking at data, ensuring that everything is ready to go to take the crew safely. And also, it's going to be a good opportunity for people to catch up on some rest.
And then from a crew standpoint, whether they're getting to space station in 8 hours or 27 hours, flight day 1 rendezvous or flight day 2 rendezvous, from a crew perspective on what they take, it's pretty much the same. Now their timeline will change because for a Saturday launch, they literally would have stayed up and pressed through docking. For the case of Sunday, it's a flight day 2 launch, and so what that entails is the crew will actually go to sleep in Dragon and wake up and then jump into the rendezvous profile and to prepare them to dock for station. Also for slips like this, depending on the timing of that, there could be cargo that has to come off or science that has to be refreshed, and maybe Kirk can address that, but I don't believe that's the case for Sunday.
Okay, next up is Tariq Malik, space.com. Go ahead, Tariq.
Hello. Thank you so much. And my question, I think, also is for Norm about the extended trip for the Crew 1 astronauts there. On the last flight with Demo 2, with kind of this lengthy trip, we saw kind of a lot of glimpses into what life on the Crew Dragon was like. And I'm curious, with this added time, what we can expect to see from the astronauts on this one. Will we get kind of like a tour, a taste of what that trip is going to be like on Monday prior to their arrival? If you can kind of walk us through what to expect and what the viewers might expect. Thanks.
Okay. Well, I'll start it out big picture and then turn it over to Benji, and he can provide some details relative as well. But, again, launch is a big deal. The crew gets up, they prep, they get on the vehicle, they go launch. And then obviously, once they get into orbit, they're going to do a series of orbital burns to get them set up, like Benji said, for that phasing to get to station. The crew has a timeline, and we can get you information on if there's, Kyle, I don't know if there's any press briefings in that time, but the crew's in constant contact with the ground, and so I'm sure, you will be hearing from them relative to that. They go to sleep. They'll have a standard sleep period. They wake up after sleeping in Dragon and start getting prepped again, eat breakfast, get situated, start prepping for the day, because it's a very important day that you start doing those critical burns, getting ready for the rendezvous profile to get set up for docking. And there's time in that day, obviously, for if anything goes wrong, and then once they're on station, they utilize that time, as was stated earlier, to really learn about station, learn what to do in case of an emergency, and obviously learn how to use a lot of the facilities on station that are going to be very important once they're docked. So, Benji, I don't know if you had anything to add.
Sure. It gives them more opportunity to try out Dragon and to be, as a crew of 4 members in Dragon, which I think will be probably, I assume, exciting for them, but also it'll be great for us to learn what that is, because it's important to understand that it's a fully capable Dragon with all 4 seats occupied. So we want to understand what that's like, and they'll be getting out of their suits and floating around just like we saw Bob and Doug do. I'm pretty sure there are a couple of broadcast events that they'll be able to do with this time period, it's checking things out, seeing the Earth go by. I know I'd love to be there too, so it's great.
Okay, let's see. Let's go to, I think Joey Roulette is next with Reuters. Go ahead, Joey.
Hey, thank you. Question for Joel. I was wondering if you could give us an update on what the talks with Russia are for mutual flights to the ISS. Are you envisioning some kind of bilateral agreement? And when do you think the soonest we can know when we'll be able to fly Russians on a U.S. crew vehicle will be? Thanks.
So we're looking to fly on each other's vehicles probably later in 2021, where we'll have a cosmonaut flying on our U.S. commercial vehicles and an astronaut on the Soyuz vehicles. We're working what we have to do, the first step is what we call an implementing arrangement that we work at the government level. And so we're working with our State Department to draft that. We submitted a draft. They'll be reviewing it, giving us comments. Once that's complete, we'll turn it over to Roscosmos, and then they'll work it within their government. They'll get it back to us. We'll have probably another iteration or so, but all that with the goal of flying in late 2021 on each other's vehicles.
Okay, the next question is from Morgan. Is it Morgan from Business Insider? Go ahead.
Hi. Steve mentioned the other day that Crew 1 is launching on an F9 with upgraded turbine wheels and COPVs. He said that these upgrades have been flying on Falcon 9s for years, but that this would be their first crew. So I'm just wondering, why did Demo 2 launch with older versions of those turbine wheels and COPVs? And also, Benji said that the Crew Dragon vehicle is now more robust to tolerate a wider range of weather conditions on splashdown. So I'm just wondering what changes he's referring to specifically and how they make the vehicle more robust. Thanks so much.
Yeah, I'll take that, Benji. Thanks. Let's see. So we do have a few upgrades flying on Crew 1, and one of the things we've been working with SpaceX on is how do we continue to evolve this vehicle? How do we continue to make it better? So the composite overwrap pressure vessels on Falcon 9, many of them have an upgraded liner that makes that liner a little bit more robust. SpaceX improved that liner and will allow it to be used a little longer. The turbine wheels on this vehicle have been upgraded. It's a pretty complicated process to design a turbine wheel. Wheels are prone to actually, when you get to a certain setting of the throttle on the engine, you can have certain conditions set up that are resonances, and so these wheels are a little bit more robust to the kind of throttle profile that the Merlin engines fly. So we're happy to have that as a safety upgrade. And then also for landing, we've made some improvements to the structure so that we can handle a little bit more wind at the landing zone, which gives us a few more opportunities to land. So those are 3 upgrades on this vehicle, and you'll continue to see upgrades with Crew 2 and future vehicles to improve safety.
Okay, let's see. I guess Jackie Waddles, CNN. Are you out there, Jackie?
Hey, I sure am. Thanks so much for doing this. Another COVID question. I was curious if I could get some insight into how the contact tracing played out. Who was in charge of it? Was it SpaceX or NASA or a joint team? And then I don't know if Benji or anyone else can speak to as well, like if there was something to arise in Hawthorne at Mission Control, how that might play out logistically.
Sure. I think that the way that we work from a medical viewpoint with us and NASA is that we have flight surgeons. We actually have SpaceX company flight surgeons, as well as NASA has flight surgeons. And of course, they have the entire Health and Human Medical Directorate that we all work very closely together. And our flight surgeons talk to the NASA flight surgeons. In fact, ours have come from NASA. And so they've worked out not only following the health stabilization protocols that we talked about, that Norm talked about, but just also overall good practices, processes, procedures, making sure we're following CDC guidelines, local guidelines, including with the contact tracing. We've worked that, these are things that while we'll do things on our side, like do the contact tracing ourselves for how we're managing all of our staff, we provide that data and we review that with NASA, and we make sure everybody's feeling really good about where we're at. In terms of critical staff, for example, like you asked, at operations in Hawthorne, or here at the Cape, for example, in our launch control and firing rooms, we also have plans in place, right? We have backup operators. Our operators have also been at a heightened level of care. They actually go into a type of quarantine themselves, very limited public involvement and access, different things that we do. We do a lot of temperature checks and screenings, and we do a lot of tests to ensure that all of our operators will also be ready for the launch and for the long-term mission as well. It's important to note that all that great science that's going to be going on station requires 6 months of work, and that means the Dragon will be up for 6 months. So we'll be monitoring Dragon systems, and of course, just like how NASA is continuing to fly ISS, we need to make sure all of these critical personnel are healthy for the long haul.
On the contact tracing, if there's any thought or any concern of compromise to the flight crew, the NASA team will be doing that contact tracing and following back, and of course working with our partner SpaceX to do that trace, or wherever or whatever contractor or NASA facility that might have come from, and we will trace that back and find out the impact. For the specific teams, if they've not had contact with the crew, we don't believe they've had contact with the crew. That's left to NASA or whatever specific contractor do those contact tracings. And as Benji said, there's overarching guidelines. It's all under the auspice of the Health Stabilization Program, and again, all the guidelines that are set forth. So it's very rigid and it's very thorough.
Okay, next up is Kenneth Chang, New York Times. Go ahead, Ken. Okay, let's see who's next in the queue. Just waiting for that update. I guess Ken dropped off. Susie from Business Insider, is that right?
Yep, thank you. So my question is, what are the launch dates beyond Sunday, and what are the most ideal launch dates beyond Sunday if you have to delay again? And what do the sea and weather conditions at the splashdown sites look like for Sunday in terms of what's required for emergency recovery?
Yeah, I can take that question. So we have a series of launch dates coming up. Obviously, Sunday is our prime date. And then we would stand down on Monday. Monday, there's a spacewalk going on in the ISS, and so that's not a good day to go up and rendezvous and dock to the space station. Tuesday also is not a good day. It's a little longer rendezvous profile, and so we really don't want to take that rendezvous profile. So the next opportunity would be Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, in the middle of next week. Right now, for Sunday, the weather looks pretty good down in this along the coast. What we do is we protect for an escape all the way from the launch pad all the way up into orbit, and so we have weather constraints. And so right now, those look pretty good for Monday. We haven't really looked that far out to Wednesday in the middle of the week, but right now the conditions look good, not only for the launch abort weather, but also for recovery weather for the drone ship, which is important to us as well. So we're pretty well set up for Sunday, and as Arlene said, we'll just have to watch a little bit the local weather here as this front comes through. Do we get some precip or some thunderstorms along that front line? So.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Thanks, everybody. That's all the questions that we had. Let's see, that leads us to Sunday, what everybody's talking about. The preparations for launch are ongoing, obviously, with our NASA TV coverage is going to continue and start at 3:15 p.m. Eastern Time on Sunday. We have a comprehensive broadcast planned for you guys, so make sure that you tune in for that. Of course, the launch, as mentioned, is targeted for 7:27 p.m. Eastern Time from Launch Complex 39A, the starting point for Crew 1's adventure, if you will, to the International Space Station. With that launch Sunday evening, Crew Dragon Resilience and its 4 astronauts are scheduled to dock at about 11 p.m., as you heard, on Monday as well. So thanks to you guys. Thanks to everybody tuning in today. And one reminder, just keep practicing social distancing and go Crew 1. Thanks again, everybody.